Welcome to Spiritual Talk with Christy Godwin and Friends, an authentic podcast where we sit and discuss all things spiritual. Hello, beautiful souls. I am Christy Godwin, psychic medium. Welcome to my podcast, Spiritual Talk with Christy Godwin and Friends. I have Mark Mezadourian. I'm always afraid I'm going to mispronounce your last
You got
name,
it.
Mark.
Yeah, you got it.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I so appreciate Mark being here. We have done a podcast in the past. For anyone who wants to go look that up, it was on angels. Mark is an angel communicator, intuitive. Just truly adore his work. If you want to look him up, he has a website, markmezadourian.com. Also on Twitter and YouTube under the same names, and also on Instagram, all under Mark Mezadourian. Please check him out. He has some great work out there. Now, what we were talking about today is about the fact that we were wondering, after we got the last podcast and some of the talk we had, is our society failing our boys and men? As a medium, I had really noticed that the majority of the people that I bring up that have taken their own lives are males. And I was mentioning that to Mark, and he confirmed the same thing. So I have a stat that I want to talk about real quick before we roll into this. When you look at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, suicide rate is highest among middle-aged white men. White males accounted for 69.68% of suicide deaths in 2020, which I found astounding, being that given our society, the white men are supposed to be the ones that hold the power. And I'm very concerned. What is going on here? Are we building a society that we're not training our males to live in? So that's what we're discussing. I do want to mention that what Mark and I are saying are our opinions. They're not clinical diagnoses. They are not things that we have tested, tried and true in the testing methods, but they're our opinions. So Mark, what have you noticed in this area?
What I've noticed in this period of time, the last 10 years or so, that we're undergoing the shift between the old masculine, the old patriarchy model, which could be defined as shut up, I know more than you do. That a very domineering, so power over rather than power with. We're witnessing the end of that dynamic.
Right.
And that's going a bit kicking and screaming. The new divine masculine, it is divine masculine, which is a confidence that's inclusive and encouraging. So that would mean a male presence who is confident in themselves, not insecure. And with that confidence, their desire is to include others and to encourage others. So it's power with as opposed to power over. So we're witnessing most of us are taught the old model, which is there's a dominance to masculinity. And that creates a rigidity. And that rigidity rejects change. So we see people who are praised, like, he didn't change in 70 years. Is that good? That kind of thing. But just seeing also then where there's a denial of feeling, a denial of emotion, a denial of processing and integration. And that rigidity might lead to a lack of resources. So in the work that I do, and I suspect the work that you do, if we encounter a family in turmoil, there's often, this is generalizing, but it's true, of like, oh, my husband will never go to therapy. That kind of dynamic where it's not okay. And if we look at this from just a romantic or dating point of view, that and this was the unresolved, or the part that I think society refused to talk about in the Me Too movement, that where it stopped was boys are bad, and not why they're bad or why women are attracted to that. So that conversation hasn't happened yet. But just seeing then where who do women find attractive? What are we modeling for that? So, and what are men taught to do, which is to be resolute and perhaps rigid, and that rigidity seeing as being positive. But
I had
go ahead.
I was going to say, in my notes, I had something almost exactly what you said. The old male thought process of I am male, what I say goes.
Yes.
Is no longer working in our society. And now where I do have a heart, I am not saying, I agree with you. Like, we need to find a way where men and women are functioning as one, as a partnership.
Mm-hmm.
And do we need to transition into a more equal society? Of course we do. But then on top of that, we need to give our men, we need to be raising our boys. We need to give men the okay. We need to give them permission to feel again, to process their emotions. I mean, when you look at all the problems that are presenting themselves, it's about men not being able to process their emotions, not being able to show that weakness and tapping it down and tapping it down.
Mm-hmm.
It's not healthy. And we're
Right.
transitioning the society into a way that that model isn't working for the male anymore, but then we're not giving them the tools and giving them the okay to process differently. And they're shutting down. They're starting to self-medicate with drugs, alcohol, abuse, whatever it may be. And that rigidity, I see that so much in my families that come to me for readings. Um, men are feeling like they're losing control. So their
Mm-hmm.
response to losing control is to control more,
Mm-hmm.
which is just creating an unhealthy living environment and one they can't function in.
Yeah.
I had, I won't say the names, of course, because readings are 100%,
Sure.
as you
Mm-hmm.
know, but
Sure.
classic example, someone had bought a reading for their husband. Instantly, I had his mom step up. He acknowledged it was her, lots of evidential information. And then she started apologizing for how she had raised him. He instantly shut me down. He didn't want
Mm-hmm.
to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Too touchy feely.
Mm-hmm.
Towards the end of the reading, the lady pops up, his wife, and we were talking a little bit, and they were about to get a divorce. It was her last ditch effort. She thought maybe if the mom had come forward from spirit. I said, well, he wasn't taking the message. It broke my heart because I could tell this family, had they had a little bit of help, had he been accepting of help, they could have made it. So he got on the phone. We talked a little bit about this anger issue that he was having.
Mm-hmm.
What he said was, my anger is not a problem for me. It's a problem for everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
He was serious.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It broke my heart because it's the family who was not going to make it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, he wouldn't get help. And it's those kinds of things. We need to give our men permission to feel, to process, to know it's okay.
Mm-hmm. And to find
So are
those
you,
qualities attractive, to
yes,
find
to
those
find them.
qualities, to validate those qualities.
And I've heard young ladies talk before just because of some of the work I do. I'm around all age groups, and some of the young
Mm-hmm.
ladies, I will hear them and it makes me just want to scream when
Mm-hmm.
they'll say, "Oh, he's too nice." Really? How can someone be too nice? Too nice is not a thing.
Mm-hmm. But this is one of our key issues here, which is that kind and conscious men are not viewed as sexually viable or romantically viable. That they're nice guys, and that there's an
Mhm.
inherent weakness to that. Perhaps that is something, and I don't know how that's going to change. Besides integration and validity, and getting um, both everyone to be on page with, let's be kind to each other, and we hear a lot about like down with the patriarchy, which is fine, I agree, but let's be clear, like who's invested in what, and the
Right.
modeling that is here, which is pretty pervasive in any entertainment, in music and such. Perhaps that gets to shift into um, being open to what what a masculine presence can be, and including all of that. And it's understanding the archetypal nature of the unavailable male, and
Yes.
where that is highly attractive, which is most people. This is a huge generalization, but I think it's mostly true. Have either like the father's not around, the father left, or was not
Mhm.
available emotionally, and
Mhm.
there's just carrying out, like that's who women are attracted to. And
Mhm.
we have to see then in that dynamic, there's a negotiation happening. The one and only time when a woman would have the unavailable man's full attention is when they're having sex.
Mhm.
That's the only
Mhm.
time. So it's kind of like this game of getting toward
Yeah.
that. So it's this seeing then where that's a very adolescent dynamic.
Mhm.
And then, so what then is the space where two conscious adults can come together, you know.
Mhm.
And I know we're only talking about just worth acknowledging, we're talking about heterosexual dynamics in this. But just that, like, what's it like to be a conscious female? What's it like to be a conscious male?
Well, I do. Yes, I think that's a fabulous
Mhm.
point you brought up. We are talking about heterosexual
Mhm.
relationships.
Yeah,
But something that I have noticed, and I have a degree, my bachelor's degree is child development, which take a lot of
great.
psychology classes. Also, tons of reading,
Hmm.
tons of working with people as you have. And what I have noticed, yes, we're talking about heterosexual relationships, but it's those relationships that tend to raise a lot of our young adults.
Hmm.
And I would like to point out that if you
Hmm.
have a male that is in a household that was traumatized as a child, they're creating this generational trauma
Hmm.
because they are not functioning well. They're lashing out in anger. They're teaching their boys not, if, teaching the boys to not express themselves correctly.
Hmm.
I was, and this, I was on the ball field the other day with my young grandbabies, and it was just so classic playing out. There was a coach. I'm great dad. I just want to put that out there. Great dad, but
Hmm.
it played out so well. My granddaughter was having a fit because they're little and they're on the ball field and
Hmm.
they're bored.
Sure.
She was handled much differently than when the boy next to her started throwing a fit.
Yeah. Yeah.
The guy did it. Sweet man out there coaching,
Hmm.
did not mean anything by it.
Hmm.
Unconsciously, he handled these two children differently.
Hmm.
My
Hmm.
granddaughter was told, go sit down, start feeling better, whatever. And the little boy was told to get on the field and basically be okay.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it starts that young.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I also do want to address what you said about how it has to be okay. We as women have to start acknowledging that the new attractive
Hmm.
has to be the man that can process his feelings.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
And
I think
that's, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and finish
I
your
was gonna
thought.
say, I think it's funny that women, dating, I've seen it happen to my girlfriends. I have daughters, and when they're dating, oh yeah, it's so attractive to have the unavailable man, the man's man, whatever you want to call him. But once you get married, what's attractive?
Hmm.
It's the man who can be a partner to you, the man who can be emotionally there for you and your children, the man who doesn't mind helping with the housework as you're helping them with the um, yard work.
Hmm. Yeah.
So we have to change what we're looking for and make it okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. To validate it and to find it attractive. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's recognizing that for the most part, kind and conscious men are going to approach dating relationships a bit differently, which is they're going to want to get to know you as opposed to like we're together now, you know, you know,
Right.
and just seeing
Um,
where like are you compatible, like do you get along, those kind of things, and to be able to
Absolutely.
establish that. Yeah, yeah.
And we're at it's a tumultuous time right now because we're at this in between stage of
Hmm.
this new norm. For those of
Hmm.
you who are spiritual inclined or astrologically inclined, we're moving into the Aquarian period, which
Hmm.
is a period of, yes, the
Hmm.
masculine and feminine are going to find a more equal footing,
Yeah, yeah,
which of
yeah.
course we need to, but we
Mhm.
also need
Yeah,
to make
yeah,
sure everyone has the tools they need to function in our
yeah,
new society.
yeah. And I think it's worth adding to this for um, boys, girls, men of heterosexual, um, homosexual, or transgender, that we all need ritual. And perhaps in America, we're incredibly light on our rituals, of these markers of growing up. And that for males, it tends to all be about a constriction of like a shutting down and being,
Mm-hmm.
resolute as opposed to a blossoming. I'm aware of I'm close to my sister's son who's now 16. I'm just aware of my languaging around him because he's a creative kid and a sensitive kid. And where there is a space of, like taking him to ball games and stuff like that, playing catch, these things that are important, and also keeping his heart open,
Yes.
you know.
Hmm.
And so, and just seeing like what is that difference. I had a striking experience. I believe it was in 2019, might have been 2018, where I was visiting my family in the Bay Area, and I was driving, and I passed by, and there was probably an 8, 9 year old boy who had fallen off his bike and was crying, was hurt. And he was crying, that he stopped crying when I showed up and refused to cry. And he was in pain. So I'm like, it's okay, buddy. And I tried to figure out like where his phone was. He had dropped his phone in the street, and calling his parents. And then that took a while, but just seeing like him shutting down in front of a stranger,
Hmm.
you know, and I was just trying to facilitate a space. It was just,
I
it was
think
striking. Yeah. Sorry.
because you can see that was the beginning. That
Totally.
was the beginning of
Totally.
that
Like,
little boy
yeah,
tapping down his feelings.
exactly. And it's like, why?
Yeah.
Like, I was just trying to, I was trying to like, it's okay to have feelings. Like, it's okay. I know
Mm,
you're hurt,
right.
but just seeing
That's
that stuffing. And then he cried when his parents came, you know? Yeah.
and I don't think you, Mark, or I, neither one would tell you that there is not a difference genetically the way men and women process.
Yeah.
But it is less different than what we think.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of that I truly feel like is, again, I have an undergrad in child development. I've spent a lot of time with children
Mm-hmm.
teaching preschools. They do process the world differently,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but not as different as we make them
Yeah.
seem.
Yeah. Yeah. And in all of this, I remember the author Michael Chabon, who wrote The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, that he and his wife were giving their children non-gender specific toys, and he gave his young daughter trucks to play with, and she says, "Here's the mommy truck, and here's the daddy truck." You know, so like some things are hardwired in there, and it's just seeing where we could be open to that and also present different opportunities.
Yes.
Just saying like honoring the wiring that is here, and just getting into what could we do, what could we
You know,
do, in this.
can you imagine, Mark, if we lived in a society where man or woman, you were able to express yourself at a soul level?
Yeah.
Your soul expression
Mm-hmm.
was free to come out.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine just how
Yeah.
accepting that would be?
Yes, that'd be great. Let's manifest that. Let's
I
manifest
am on, I
that.
just, when I say that all the time, I would talk about people's soul expression. If you're letting people express their souls, you're not going to go
Yeah.
wrong because
Mm-hmm.
our soul is loving. I'm not talking
Mm-hmm.
about someone who is, being mean and rude and bullying and saying, well, this is my soul. That is not your soul. Your soul
No.
is love. Your soul is
Mm.
pure, unconditional love.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you let people operate, what is the harm in letting your boy operate from that pure,
Mm-hmm.
letting your daughter
Mm-hmm.
operate from that pure, unconditional love?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I always laugh at when people, come to me. Of course, I'm sure you get a lot of judgment, maybe not as much as I do, but get quite a bit of judgment. And I would say, can you imagine you're approaching Heaven's Gate? You've passed your transition. You're approaching Heaven's Gate. Someone is there with the book, and they're like, you know what? You didn't quite make our list to enter heaven because you didn't judge enough. Go back to earth, try judging more, and maybe we'll let you in next time. So I don't know why people think that judgment is the way that they're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. It's Ram Dass spoke about this, that he talked about Western culture being about an addiction to differences,
Mm-hmm.
and that we're the theme of this era is that addiction to differences, where it's about difference, divide, hating people, feeling threatened by other people. These people are bad, these people are good. And perhaps our spiritual lesson right now, and I think we talked about this in our previous conversation, which is, what if we unsubscribed from all of that and
Right.
focused on love? And to recognize that perhaps all that's manufactured to distract us. And what if we honestly
Absolutely.
saw past that into a space of, we don't have to agree with everyone. Martin Luther King
Right.
talked about this, agape love, which is you don't have to like everyone, but you could love them. You could see perhaps the pain that they're experiencing and have a sense of camaraderie around that and recognizing that our common experience right now is all the traumas on the surface for us to process and for us to heal.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that is creating terror for some people. And it's coming back to the I think one of the most important points that you brought up earlier, which is this rash of men unable to survive.
It
You
breaks
know,
my heart.
yeah, and just seeing where doing mediumship of talking to those folks who are passed with families that when folks do take their own lives, that they're seeking relief, and when they make that decision, finally, it is a freight train. There's nothing we could do to stop that.
Right.
um, and but they leave a mess, and it's the questions. And I think it's just worth in this one particular individual, someone who's part of the Portland spiritual scene who I knew briefly, but he took his own life and during the pandemic, which was a bit of a common experience. Um, but within that, it's just the difference between um, talking talking to him and him being in a glorious space of relief and
Yeah.
peace and sending positive messages of reassurance to his sibling who I was speaking to. Um, but at the same time, that sibling going like, what could I have done? And a sense of failure.
Right.
And it's
Right.
just seeing
Absolutely.
where there was not the resources provided. And like, so if we work backwards, like where did that start? What's it
Mhm.
like to be a sensitive man in this world? You know, where in the dating dynamics we were speaking about earlier, like you don't fit, you know?
Right. You don't.
Yeah. So,
And
yeah.
that is, and we have talked a lot about people that have purposely taken their own lives.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a whole nother range. I mean, I've already, Mark and I are talking, it's the afternoon where I am. I've already had, I think four readings today. Two of them had people in there who had not necessarily purposely taken their own lives, but they were self-medicating.
Yeah.
And one
Mm-hmm.
of them had self-medicated to the point where they had passed, and
Mm-hmm.
the other had gotten a hold of some not good drugs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we're just talking about the one in the stats, the ones that have actually taken their own lives. There's a
Mm-hmm.
whole nother ones that I think that we're overlooking in this stat are ones that are self-medicating because they don't know how to feel. And so they
Mm-hmm.
want to numb that feeling. And that goes back to what Mark was talking about, the trauma processing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Trauma processing is incredibly difficult and hard. And but if you're going to make it on this side, it has to be done. If you're going to make function in a healthy manner, if you're going to live the life you're meant to live.
Yeah. And maybe, Christy, we could talk about what people can do with this,
Absolutely.
because I'm going to, positively profiling, I'm going to guess the majority of the audience here is going to be women who might have a partner or a son or a brother or a father who is in this dynamic, or a son who in this dynamic
Yeah.
that we're talking about. And if we could just approach this from ritual and the healing power of acknowledgement,
Yes.
to acknowledge what that individual can do and can't do, and perhaps creating a space for them to not be wrong or bad, to facilitate a space where they could express feelings and not be judged. And what that might
Absolutely.
sound like, and the simple tool that might be there, is to give them a talking stick and give them opportunity just to express themselves without interruption.
Without judgment. How many times do you listen
Mm-hmm.
to have a response?
Mm-hmm.
Listen to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Don't judge. However you feel is how you feel, and that is okay.
Yeah.
It is okay to feel whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's a couple of, I do want to, there's one book that I know Mark mentioned last time, so I know he's read it. It's a little bit in depth, but there is one that's called, for those of you looking, I'm going to put it up to the screen. It's called Permission to Feel by Mark Brackett.
Mm-hmm.
This is an easier read than the other one I'm about to show y'all, which is The Body Keeps Score.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them are very good. Permission to Feel is, I think you should probably start with that one if you're not familiar with this territory. It's just a lot easier to process and easier to get through.
Mm-hmm.
But the gentleman who wrote the book, Mark Brackett, it talks a lot just about what Mark was just saying. It's a lot. It's a whole book on give people permission to talk, give your boys permission to feel what they're feeling, and don't judge them.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay for boys to cry. There are things that they need to cry about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then people say, don't be angry. No, it's okay to be angry. You just have to have a healthy expression for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not okay to hurt others in your anger, to hurt others when you're hurt, but it's okay. It's okay to. There was, and I do want to address, a lot of people talk about, and of course, with my education, it came up a lot, the old adage of, is it nature versus nurture?
Mm-hmm.
Lots of studies have been done, and I have seen people before, people in my own family, as a matter of fact, someone said, it's just in the family. It's just in the family. It's just in the family because it was taught in the family.
Yeah.
We can stop. We can say no more. It stops with my generation.
Yeah.
And also I want to mention to people, if you see it happening, if you see you have a nephew or someone who you don't have responsibility for and you have no power to control their environment, you would be amazed how powerful it is to be a listening ear. You don't have to change people's environment. You don't have to change how they're being parented. It's powerful to be a listening ear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I also want to address sometimes the older generations, which, oh my goodness, it makes me roll my eyes and, a very love and light kind of way. When people say that the new generation, they're just too weak, they just need to toughen up. Have you heard that?
I have. And this is, I understand all points of view with that, but it's understanding the young kids now, they're wired differently and they're
Yeah,
wired for collaboration. So the rugged individualism that America, imprints on kids, especially boys, perhaps is not where they live. And it's just recognizing
absolutely.
that evolution and that change where they're much more keen on collaboration and doing things together rather than, you know, going it alone.
Absolutely. I think that's a beautiful adage that you have to think about the history of our country. That was survival, toughen up, get it done was survival of our
Yeah.
country.
Hmm.
Hundreds of years, we're not in that time anymore. That
Hmm.
is, we have to change the way we're thinking. We have to give our boys permission to function in our new society, but honoring who they are,
Hmm.
honoring their feelings,
Hmm.
honor them as a sensitive being that they are,
Yeah. Yeah.
but they're still boys.
Yeah. I had a unique experience this summer of encountering three teenage young men from Sweden, and they were not anxious. And they live in a small town in Sweden. And I was talking separately to both their parents. Like, well, what created these three unanxious teenagers? Where I would say easily 7 out of 10 teenagers here are anxious. And,
Easily.
that they are easy, if not 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. And just, they don't have guns in Sweden. They're safe in their schools. They're loved, you know, and just all the competition things that we have inherently based in America. Like one of them is 19 and already going to medical school and it's free. And just seeing all the competition things, all the barriers and this and that, all the hoops to go through in America, you know, but just seeing the in terms of threats and what threats do to us and how they get us to constrict, be that an overt threat, be that a societal threat, be that a gender threat, be that an overt threat. But the idea that, seeing, we might have talked about this last time, but like the social violations that are happening, that if a kid calls 911, so an adult should respond, and just seeing where it's a little bit like the Wild West. I know families who are talking about moving to Portugal or different parts of Europe or Canada and such, of seeing where that's really scary for kids, you
Hmm.
know, and what we could do to foster that sense of security for them and protect them, but to
Yeah.
understand those are feelings. I worked with a client, I'm going to be general to protect her privacy, but there was a serial killer at work when she was a teenager, targeting people her exact age. And, her parents were dismissive of that, like, oh, you'll be fine. But to her, that was a real threat. And that's
Yes.
something that 50 years later we're clearing because the fight or flight response was kicked in there and
Hmm.
she took action. And how that is manifested now is she makes sure that her doors are locked,
Hmm.
which she gets teased for in her family. It's just saying, like, this is validating that's a strong action. And it's safe
Right.
as a conscious adult to take action to make sure that you are safe, which sounds simple, but just seeing where we could support each other and validate each other in our diverse experiences to recognize that our behavior comes from somewhere. It's not random. And that we're taught,
Absolutely.
taught these things or we adapt to these things and we survive. And it's creating a space. What we could do for children, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, is to really honor their experience and provide reassurance and perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and America
And
as a country, one last thought here, is that we don't like wisdom. And, like, why not? And what's wrong with wisdom? What's wrong with learning? What's wrong with passing along the best of what we know? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I know that Mark and I are trying to cover this broad subject. I mean, there are so many things. My brain is, I'm trying to keep on track because there's so many things that I'm
Yeah,
sure he's the same way, that we could just go down all these rabbit holes of
indeed.
where
Mm-hmm.
we're going, what's causing this. This
Mm-hmm.
is a short podcast, no way can we fix it in this. But I am with Mark, and then I want everyone to go away with a viable tool to help in what he just said. Honor people, understand that you and I could have gone through the exact same trauma, but we are different people, so we're going to process it differently.
Mm-hmm.
Don't judge other people's processing of it. Listen, give people permission to be who they are at a soul level. Listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
Give our boys, honor them, love them. And it's a society as a whole. I would say the vast majority of the people that I bring through from the other side that have passed by their own hand or overdoses, they knew that their mom, dad, whoever loved them,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't feel accepted by society. Maybe they felt judged, they couldn't process their emotions. They were feeling powerless. They had heard, there was one phrase I had written down because I'd heard it so much lately. People using the excuse of, well, that's just the way I am.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some of our older generations that don't
Mm-hmm.
want to change along with our society is changing and saying that's just the way I am. But you don't have to be that way. Just give a listening ear. Be
Mm-hmm.
kind. Honestly, kindness to me is hard. I grew up in a household that was survival of the fittest.
Mm-hmm.
When you grow up in a household where it is not safe to be kind, it is not safe to show weakness, I get that. It's
Yeah.
scary then to show weakness.
Yeah.
So, but think about that. If you want to be truly powerful, show kindness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
To me, that's where the power really lies.
Indeed. I'm sorry you had to deal with that, and here you are right now helping people by
Well, I
being
think
kind.
at some point, everyone has.
Yeah.
I mean, if you line 10 people up, I would say 9 of them are probably going through traumatic events. I read people and I'm like, oh my goodness, my childhood was a piece of cake compared to yours, just the
Yes.
trauma
But we don't
that,
compare. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, you don't know. I
Yeah.
always
No,
laugh
we don't know. Mm-hmm.
that, people, because I know how to put my makeup on and do my hair, people must have think I lived a charmed childhood. How many people do you know that are like that because they judge
Mm-hmm.
people from the outside? You look like you have it together, so you must have it together. You don't know what people are experiencing.
No, we don't. But we can have compassion and curiosity with
Yes.
that. I do think to all the points you just made about of this idea about identity, the last, 2.5 years in the pandemic have all been about interrupting. Our patterns have been interrupted, our priorities have shifted. We've been told what to do, whether we agree with it or not. And is just seeing where that interruption on a cosmic level or divine level is intentional to get us to be focused on what we would like to have happen. And
I
perhaps
agree.
in that do-over, in that reinvention, in that shift, a lot of people vanished from people's lives, a lot of changes happened. But just seeing, then we have this opportunity to take to seize and to use to our advantage to really let positive change happen. And perhaps if we could just back it up into one thing, which is hypervigilance, and just recognizing where hypervigilance is present, it's making sure, this sounds so simple, but perhaps it's really profound, is to make sure that everyone feels safe. That if there's a kid
Absolutely.
who's worried about what's under the bed, what's in the closet, that we help them, and that we reassure them that, like, these doors are locked, let's lock them together, this light can stay on, all these different things, and just kind of like going
Absolutely.
through the space, you know?
Absolutely. And something else that I want to address, because I know we're about out of time, but
Yeah. Hmm.
if your child is feeling unsafe at school,
Hmm.
acknowledge that.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people feel like, oh, they just have to learn to deal with it. They have to, no, no, no,
Maybe
no.
not. Yeah.
You give them tools, go to the counselor, start wherever your child is. If you
Yeah.
have a teenager who is feeling unsafe, help them feel safe. Don't make them go it alone. There are programs out there that can help them.
Yeah. And there's so many different alternatives to regular school at this point
Oh
that
my goodness.
it's
Yes.
it's infinite, and there's a whole community to support kids in that realm and such. Yeah.
I have three daughters. We homeschooled them all.
Hmm. Great.
And of course they went on to college. I did not do that part.
Hmm.
But my one of my daughters is now homeschooling her kids, and the difference in curriculum now, I was like, oh my goodness, this is beautiful. We were
Hmm.
struggling, when I was
Hmm.
homeschooling, it wasn't a thing. We struggled
Hmm.
with curriculum. Now there's some
Hmm.
beautiful curriculum out
Hmm.
there.
Yeah.
But I would want everyone's takeaway to be one of positivity. We can maneuver this change in our society. The first step to acknowledging and to fixing a problem is acknowledging we have.
Hmm.
We can. We can absolutely give our young people the love and support they need to be functioning adults.
Hmm. Yeah.
We can do that.
We can indeed.
Start by listening.
Hmm. Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for being with me today, Mark. I know we tackled just a huge subject. We did a pretty good job staying on board. We could have gone down so many rabbit holes.
I think so. We're not done, but here it is. But and
Right.
just to give people resources of just, the books that Christy mentioned are a really good space, and the trauma, just recognizing where trauma is at hand and where trauma is generational, and that we can interrupt it and change it at any time.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
In the whether you're listening to the podcast or you're going to the YouTube channel,
Mhm.
Mark's contact will be on there. My contact will be on there, and I'll also put those couple of books. But if you just go to Amazon, your local library, and just start searching books on how to
Mhm.
help children feel or
Mhm.
emotional trauma, any of that, there are some
Mhm.
great resources out here.
There are.
Thank you so much for being with me, Mark. I appreciate
Oh,
your
thank
time
you.
today.
Thank you. Thank you. I
Hope
appreciate it.
everyone has a blessed day. Thank you all for being with us today.